My name is Greg George. I'm an applications engineer, and today's 3D Spotlight is about the Scan Process Designer. So to start off, what are scan processes? Um, Here's a little description of what that is in a screenshot here. Scan processes are a tool designed to plan a series of commands and their parameters together into an automated routine. So as you see in the screenshot, you're able to take different commands that are available in the software, and based on this drag and drop type interface, you're able to pull the commands over into a series that the software will automatically walk through. And then you can use those to plan routines and run them repeatedly on different types of applications. So speaking of applications, there's a wide range of things that you can do with them. These are just a couple examples of things that we currently use them for. Obviously, you can take these commands and you can uh, come up with all kinds of creative applications for them. But here's four different ones that I typically see out in the market right now. Just your general merging of scans. So you can take the common button clicks that you run through where you'll take scans and run through the same tools over and over again, these repetitive tasks. You can automatically create combinations of emerging processes and then use them in a repeatable way. Auto surfaces are a really good one too. You can set it up with the proper settings that you like to use, and then use the auto surface command inside of these scan processes. Another one that saves an awful lot of time is data conversion. So there are many instances where you may want to automatically export files with different settings or different file types, and you can select those objects and then hit export and use the scan processes to batch export. And then another one that I thought of is scanner processes. And this is one that I kind of stumbled on, scanner presets. The software has a lot of different settings that we can change and in these different tools, and what you can do is kind of establish some baseline presets for different types of scanning. So two extreme examples are maybe you're using a small short range scanner that has very high accuracy within a small envelope, maybe with objects that are less than 1 inch. You may have some very geometry capture accuracy, like tight tolerances there, and then you could develop some scan processes that have the proper presets to merge those types of scans. And then another example would be maybe you're using a terrestrial scanner where you scan large objects like a city block or something like that. And now those are going to have very different presets that you're going to use within the software. And you could actually tailor different scanner processes to automatically run on those different types of data sets. So here are four highlighted ones that we'll talk about today. But one other thing not to forget about for more applications is the idea of batch processing. So the major difference between batch processing and scan processes is scan processes will run within the current Design X document that you're working on, where batch processes, you can actually point Design X to a folder full of scans or data sets and then tell it to run the same exact scan processes that we build for internal things. You can also reuse those for batch processing applications. And then it allows you to, again, run on external files. And then the automation tool actually has some more the batch process tool has more automation tools. So you can see in this window dialog, which we will run here in a minute, you're able to add a bunch of files and dictate where the output files get saved, what types of formats, and then if there are errors, it has the ability to generate a log as well and pause for those errors. So the batch processing tool has been around for a long time. And essentially what we did is took that batch processing tool and built the scan process tool that allows you to run inside of the software. So now what I'm going to do is take Design X and actually run some of these and show you how to build a sample scan process. So here's Design X, and here's a sample data set that we have up on screen. In the Home tab, you can see that we have a basic workflow. This is one thing that we talk about often. We try to set up the Home tab as you can either scan or open data and walk from left to right through a basic Design X workflow. And you'll notice right after the scanning section, we have the drop down here for the scan process designer and then run scan process. So we'll start out by going into the designer. And what we can do is I'll just build a sample one just to explain how that works. So I can start with a brand new scan process here. And you'll see across the top of the dialog, you do have the ability to import a process from somebody else. And these are basically saved out as XML file formats. So if you develop one of these, you can come right over to the export option and save out a file, send it to someone else, and they can import it and use it, and it will have the same exact settings that you ran. You can, of course, delete these. You can duplicate them and then run them from here, and then you can jump over to the batch processing and then exiting the designer. So with a data set like this, what you typically do is you will scan an object and it has a bunch of different scans like you can see over here on the left-hand side. What we typically need to do is do an alignment between those. So if I just drag over a line between scan data and I turn it over to global fine, and then I set the settings the way that I want them, I can set those and then hit OK, and it will apply that to that section. So after I align, what I typically do is run a merge. And what you can do is you can say that, change your settings here. Maybe I want to do a mesh construction merge, 0.06, maybe reduce noise, adjust that and hit OK. Now, after that, what I like to do is go ahead and decimate the data set down to a known size. So when I scan this object, it could be 30 million points. I'm not sure exactly how many points that is or triangles that is. And then it's going to merge everything. And then I like to reduce it down to a specific size. So you could type in, 500,000 triangles. So you can say to decimate that or reduce the size down to a known resolution. And then another common thing to do is a global remesh with an edge multiplier of 1. So just keep it around the same resolution. And in this case, if this object is going to be fully scanned, you could tell it, make a clean and manifold solid mesh. So you could tell it to automatically fill all the holes, merge it into one shape that's a solid. And then if I'm going to be doing reverse engineering, I will then jump over and even drag over a region group, as you can see down below. So I could also run a healing wizard and then a region group. So this is kind of a typical workflow that I would run through. And then once you're done, you can save the scan process and name it whatever you want. Right? So if I wanted to name that demonstration and then hit OK. Now, once I want to run one of these, I can actually just come right over to Run Scan Process. And I could select from the drop down all the ones that I've built ahead of time. So if I wanted to run maybe I want to run my mesh construction. And then you have some settings in here to adjust, whether you wanted to rename the file or stop if there are errors. And then you need to tell it which data to run on. So I will select all of the data, run the mesh process, mesh construction, and then hit the checkbox. So now, while it's running, you'll see it. Sometimes it happens very fast, but you'll notice down below it will show each step along the way. So it's going to register, merge, and walk through the same steps that we set up inside of these scan processes. So now that it finished, I can go ahead and turn off the original scans and zoom in. You see that it's already regioned. I'll turn those off as well. So you see it went ahead and merged everything together and created one nice clean mesh. This also, because everything is happening automatically and going right from one command to the next, there's a time savings there. And since it's also not having to update the graphics, there's a performance aspect there that gains you a lot of performance and speed there. So now another thing that you can do is take this scan and you could run an auto surface using this to add an auto surface into the process. So let's go ahead and open up the scan processes designer again. And you can see here that we have some that are already pre-built actually. So before you run an auto surface, you might want to run the healing wizard, and then you can set the settings for the auto surface and then even tell it to go ahead and export the solid as whatever type of, so let's just save it as a step file, and then we can tell it to save it to my desktop. And then you can even just say use this name and then hit OK. So we'll just take that auto surfacing example and come over and say run scan process, auto surfacing on this data set, and then it will go ahead and automatically fit NURBS surfaces to it, and then write that file out to export that file out to the desktop, as you'll see here in a second. So it looks like it finished there. If I go ahead and hide the mesh, you'll see that it created a CAD object by auto surfacing it. And if I go to File, Import, and go to the desktop, and I just filter by the step, you'll see that it's got model.step that it exported for me automatically. So you could even add that to the end of the mesh processing scan process that I created earlier, where it goes ahead and merges all of the steps, auto surfaces, and exports it out. So that's another thing that you can do with it. So another thing that you're able to do is apply a transform matrix to a data set. So inside of the designer, one tool that you may have noticed in here, as you scroll through, there is an option to transform data. So if I drag that over, you can rotate and translate manually, or you can type in values, you can add scaling to it, or you can use this matrix option. So if you're scanning with a scanner that has maybe a fixture or a turntable on it where there is a known location that you always set the part, one thing that you can do is you can align the part inside of Design X export the matrix from the alignment and then load that up in here. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is create a new scan process. And you'll see that it's here. Drag over transformation. And earlier, I loaded up this same scan and I aligned it to the world using the interactive alignment there. So I'm just going to say by matrix from file, and I'm going to select the part transformation file. And you'll see there's the matrix, and then I'll hit OK and save. So now if I come over to run scan process, I could tell it to run on the combined scan. So what we're going to do is take this scan. As you can see, it's not aligned to the world coordinate system of the CAD. And I aligned it earlier and saved out a transformation value. So we load that transformation value inside of the scan process designer. So if I come over to align, discard that, and you'll see that this just has that matrix in it. So we'll take that, come over to run scan process, select align, select the object that we want to apply that one to, and run it, and you'll see that it moves it to that location. So it's a very powerful tool to save a lot of time. Now, as far as the batch processing goes, the batch process works exactly the same as the scan process as far as how you build the scripts, and you can even build them inside the process designer. But if you want to run a batch process, you have to come over here to File, Batch Process, and you'll see the process designer is the same, but if you come over to Run Batch Process, you can select the script that you want to run. In this instance, what I was planning on doing is maybe running like an export one. So if we run a test process of maybe exporting a file as a different file type. So if we come over to Process Designer, we say that we want to make a new one, and we can just call it, let's say that we just want to take a bunch of files and export them as a mesh with a specified name. We will say, let's save them out as maybe OBJ format. And we're going to go ahead and just put them in my 20-minute webinar folder. And we're going to export each mesh as a separate file with millimeters as my units, and then hit OK. So now we have this export script that we created. We can come back over to batch process run, and then I can come over to export. Now I just need to tell it what files to run on. So you can hit, I'm going to take all of these scans and load them in here and tell it to run. So you can say to run on each file. You can load it. You can tell it to store it in a specific location. So if I wanted to go in here and then put them all in that same batch folder, I can put it in a folder that's like output 2 maybe. You can even tell it to save it as a XRL, which is the Design X file type, and generate a log to tell you if everything worked. And then now if you say start batch process, it will go ahead and process the file. You see it walk through each one of them here. And then there's the output. So now if I go to import, because this isn't the same file, I go to the batch, I go to output. You'll see in output I have now a bunch of OBJ files created from that same object.